We're moving on to adding, subtracting, and multiplying fractions with word problems. We're going to do a couple of adding, subtracting word problems and a couple of multiplying word problems, and then you're going to do some on your own. So let's look at number 1 here. Marcus spent 2 2/3 hours on his science project and 1 11/12 hours on a math project over the last 2 weeks. How much time did he spend altogether on the project? So first of all, this word right here, altogether, tells me that I'm going to need to add my 2 fractions together. We're going to go ahead and move on. And I have 2 2/3 plus 1 11/12. All right, if you remember from our adding and subtracting videos, we need to find a common denominator. And I'm going to keep my whole number, 3 and 12. Their least common or their common denominator could be 12. So 3 becomes 12 by multiplying it by 4. 2 becomes 2 times 4 is 8. This already had a denominator of 12, so it gets to stay the same. We will add our whole numbers together. 2 plus 1 is 3. Keep our denominator, and then 8 plus 11 is 19. 3 and 19/12. I have an improper fraction here, so I have to divide. I divide 19 divided by 12. 12 can go into 19 one time. 1 times 12 is 12. I subtract and I'm left with 7. Now this 1 gets added to this 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. And then 7 is my numerator and 12 is my denominator. 4 and 7/12. But I'm actually not finished because I need to label my answer. What are we talking about? We're talking about hours. 4 and 7/12 hours. We need to have our label. Let's move on to the next problem. Melissa has 7½ cups of sugar. She will use 3 2/5 cup in a cookie recipe and 2 7/8 cups in a cake recipe. How many cups of sugar will she have left? Well, will she have left? There we go. So I know I'm going to subtract, but in this problem, I'm also going to be adding as well, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If you look at the problem, it says she's going to use this many cups with her cookie and this many cups in a cake. And I could do 7 1/2 minus 3 2/5 and then minus 2 7/8. But I don't want to do that. That's a lot of subtracting and I'd much rather add. So I'm going to go ahead and add 3 2/5 plus 2 7/8, and then I'm going to subtract that answer from 7½ cups. Okay, so I'm going to find my common denominator. A common denominator between 5 and 8 would be 40. Keep my whole number. 5 times 8 equals 40, so 2 times 8 is 16. Keep my whole number. Denominator becomes 40. 8 times 5 is 40, so 7 times 5 is 35. And now I add across. I add my whole numbers. 3 plus 2 is 5. I keep my denominator and I add my numerators. And that actually equals 51. This is not a proper fraction, so I must divide. 51 divided by 40. Goes one time. If I subtract, I am left with 11. So I add that 1 to my 5. That becomes 6 and 11/40. Now I can subtract that from my 7½ I have my 7½ minus 6 11/40. Now, the common denominator here would be 40. Keep my whole number. 2 times 20 equals 40. 1 times 20 equals 20. And luckily here, it is already 40. Now I have 7 and 20/40 minus 6 and 11/40. 7 minus 6 is 1. 20 minus 11 is 9. And my denominator stays the same. 1 and 9/40. 9 and 40 do not have a common factor. So it is simplified, but we are missing something. We are missing the unit. It is asking how many cups of sugar will she have left? And we found out that she will have 1 and 9/40 cups of sugar. All right, cups of sugar. So we have to put down our label. Let's move on to multiplication. You are not doing 3, 4, or 5 on that problem. You can always do them for practice. 1 pitcher holds 1 3/4 of a gallon of lemonade. So let's write that fraction out. 1 3/4 of a gallon of lemonade. How much lemonade will there be altogether if 5 1/2 pitchers are filled? 5 1/2 are filled. Now, if you remember, before we can multiply fractions, we have to change them into before we can multiply mixed numbers, we have to change them into improper fractions. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7/4, times 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11/2. There are no common factors, so I cannot cross cancel. I just have to multiply across. I get 7 times 11, which is 77. 4 times 2, which is 8. 77/8. This is an improper fraction, and we know to change our improper fraction into a mixed number, we must divide. 77 divided by 8. 8 can go into 77 9 times. That gives me 72, and I'm left with 5. Now remember, this 9 becomes my whole number, this 5 becomes my numerator, and the 8 becomes my denominator. But if you remember from our last problems, I am not finished. 9 5/8 of what? It wants to know how much lemonade. Now, 9 5/8 lemonade is not correct. This is gallons of lemonade. So 9 5/8 gallons of lemonade. Gallons of lemonade. Our next problem is Emilio. We're going to do number 3. Emilio is going to run 6 1/3 miles a day for 8 days. How many miles will he have completed altogether by the end of the 8th day? So we have 6 1/3 times 8 for 8 days. These need to be changed into improper fractions. 3 times 6 plus 1 gives me 19/3. And then to put a whole number as a fraction, I put it over 1. There are no common factors, so I cannot cross cancel, but I must multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3, but I do not know what 9 times 8 is. I'm actually going to go over to the side. 19 times 8. Solve that. That's a 2, that's a 7, that's 152. This is an improper fraction, so I need to divide. Let's see, that can go 5 times. And that leaves me with a 0, and I bring down the 2. 3 cannot go into 2, so I have to put a 0 there. And then I am done. I do not need to add a decimal because I'm going to change it to a fraction. My whole number is 50, my numerator is 2, and my denominator is 3. 50 2/3 miles. You are going to solve a few problems on your own on page 18. You will then check it with the answer key. If you get any of the problems wrong, highlight it. You can write the correct answer, but then you must fix your work.